All right, welcome to another day of ShopBot training. I am Ryan Patterson. For those that do not know, I see a couple new sign-ins today. What we're going to take a look at today is creating and using layers, both to help organize our drawings and help keep things organized of what we have on the screen, and also to help us with creating toolpaths. I don't think this is going to be a very long session today, but we'll see. I've been surprised before. I get talking and forget to stop. So we'll give it a go, see what we have. So I have three different scenarios that we're going to work with. One, as we see here on the screen, is hopefully a recognizable item. It is a cabinet that has been nested out that has several layers on it. I'll come back to what layers are. Then we have another project that is just a lot of varying toolpaths that are going to be needed to complete this project here. And then we have the most easiest, I think, projects to start out with to understand what a layer is. This was a little bitmap raster tracing project that I was working on. And you can look at later other videos about how to trace this bitmap, but the first thing that brought this up for us to explain what the layers are. If you've done any kind of raster tracing, when you bring in an image, which I have here, it is brought in on its own layer, and we can see layers by the layer tab here. Currently, I have two layers. One is a bitmap layer. One is just a default layer name. We could right-click that layer name and rename it, and we could specify, whatever name we want it to be there. We'll learn more about layer names and why you would want to create layer names. I don't think there's a lot of people that really get in real deep into layer creations or creating new layers. So the reason that they are useful is if you're working on an image or a project like I have here, it is very nice to be able to see what you have on top or underneath of the picture image. I do have some vectors that I drew in here, which are kind of hard to see. It looks like it's right. So to have this on a different layer or a layer name, we could just turn that off, and we see the only thing that is left is the vectors that are supporting on that layer or on layer one at this example. Shutting both of them off kind of cleans the slate. We still have all of those drawing objects there. They are just hidden, turned off, not visible anymore. So again, could turn on only the bitmap layer, have them both turned off, or just one versus the other. You could also use the layers to automatically or help select objects. So if I wanted to select all the vectors here and not, you could always select the layer where current layer is on layer one. If you right click, and you could make a selection based on the current layer. So select all vectors on the current layer. And we can see all of those vectors have been selected. And the current layer is, again, the one that's listed across the top and the one that is in bold off to the left. So that is just a very short and easy example of why you would want to have layers. I'm going to jump over and take a look at a cabinet nesting, and this nesting has several features, or this cabinet has several features that are separated by layer names. We can see those layer names off to the left over here. Just going to turn them all off, and we'll kind of flip them on individually and see what's going on with them. So right now, if you notice, we have one of those layers names is red. It is red because it's saying that that layer is the current layer, but it is turned off. That is okay. All the layers are turned off, but just note that if you see red, that means that that layer is the current layer that is indicating that it's been turned off. So I'm going to make the cut layer the current layer and then turn that on. So you can see that looks like it is the perimeter cuts for the cabinet components. And some dados, another dado over here, some hinge holes, shelf holes, and some holes for drawers. So we're going to take a look at how we could use these layers that have already been created and how we could use those layers to create toolpaths based on those layers. The final project that we're going to take a look at does not have any layers in it at all, but we're going to take and kind of break all of this drawing component apart and put them onto new layers. So let's start with the cabinet layout first, since layers are already created, and we're going to use the existing layer names to be able to select vectors and the objects to be able to create toolpaths from them. So there's this thing that is called toolpath templates. A toolpath template is things that you already have saved out or items that you have already calculated toolpaths for. And it's like a repetitive thing. If you're going to plan on using those again, as you would if you're a cabinet maker making, anytime there's a shelf hole, they're most likely always going to use the same bit and always at the same depth. So why have to go through and select out all of that every time you create a new cabinet? We could just kind of set that up based on layer names. So the way I work with this is leave the layer list on the left side open and just kind of start from the top to the bottom and work them in the order that I really have to would want these cut out. So we have holes here. Yeah, I would probably do all the drilling first. The next thing I would not do is the cut. So I'd do that cut last. And we can move that down in our layer list by just selecting the layer and moving it down. And now the layers are pretty much set up in the order that I would specify the cutting for. So we're going to leave the drawing tab opened up. So I don't normally, for working with just the toolpath thing, I would click the button here to switch to the toolpath side. This case, I'm not going to do it because I do want to see all of the layer names listed here. And I'm also going to be doing a copy and a paste of that layer name, just to be able to get the toolpath named just the same. So now I've opened up the toolpath side, locked it open, and going to start at the top list. That is for a drawer holes. So that's some drilling that's going to be done. So we're going to do a drilling toolpath, do a depth of 1/2 inch. And this is everything that you enter in here is the same as you would for toolpathing anything else. Although if you notice, I did not select any objects. I'm not going to. I'm going to use the layer names as a selection. So I'm going to cut to a depth of 1/2 inch. And I do have to get another bit placed in here, so we're going to quickly do that. It's 3/16, which I would really use a 5mm, but I just have a hard time mixing and matching 5mm bits into the same tool base. So I'm not going to worry too much more about it other than just so we could have a bit in there to select that. If you watched the video from a couple weeks ago, we have one for entering in tool databases and working on that. So not a whole lot more information on that. Not going to peck drill. This is wood. Don't need to worry about that. And I'm going to use this button down here that's called selector. This is going to allow us to select what layer we want to have this toolpath with. So this was we're going to start at the top, the drawer holes. So I want to do all closed vectors, and I want to check the box for drawer holes. It's kind of hard to see, but notice that all of the vectors on that layer have been selected. I also want to click the associate with the toolpath, and I'm telling you I want it checked now, but I'm going to uncheck that so we could use it as an example to show what's going to happen. So setting that drawer holes there, select close. And now the layer name, I'm going to right click, rename, do a Control C to copy that, and then a Control V. And this way, when we're looking at the toolpaths in our list, they kind of match up to the layer names. It makes it a little bit easier to understand what's going on and what layers are associated with what. So with that done, just select Calculate. It now created the toolpath for the objects that are on that drawer layer. Now, the reason that I wanted to show unchecking or not checking that associate with a toolpath or associate with the toolpath is any newly drawn items that I place on that layer are not going to be included in this toolpath here. So if I wanted to draw another circle on the current layer, which the current layer is the drawer holes, if we come over here to click recalculate, it says that they've all been recalculated successfully, but my new circle doesn't have any toolpaths for it. And the reason for that is I did not have them associated. So to add that box, I'm going to go here and double click the toolpath, come down to the bottom, hit that selector button once more, and this time we will check the associate with toolpaths and click calculate. That hole now has toolpaths that are included here. So any newly drawn items, regardless of where they are, how big they are, we're just drilling. So it's going to go to the center of all of those circles. When we click the recalculate button, all of those items or every item that is placed on that current layer or on that associated layer name is going to get the toolpath applied to it, which is great for when you're kind of designing, working around, and just makes things a lot easier to where you don't have to remember to select any newly drawn items that you want to have with associated or cut with that toolpath. The one worry that you have to really pay attention to and understand is a lot of times when you're drawing, you end up with, scratch paper, I call it, out in the border where you just drew a couple things to kind of get alignment right, sizing right, bring it back over. So you got to make sure that you don't have any objects that you do not want to cut on that layer or on any associated layer. So hopefully that was explained okay. I'm going to delete all of those circles and just do a recalculate. At this point, we're going to go through for the next few layers. The next two really are identical to the drawer layers in the holes. But I don't want to have them included, although I could, if I chose to, double click this drawer and coming down to the selector, we can select more than one layer to associate with the toolpath. So we can select the other ones too, and they're all going to get the same parameters to it. I'm going to keep them separately. For today, I am going to be drilling all of those down to the same depth. But some jobs, the depth might change from one versus the other. I might want to just mark placement for the drawers and not go all the way to the full depth. So we're going to separate them. Rather than going through that whole process again for drilling toolpath, I'm going to right click on the toolpath that's already in the list and select delete, or not delete, duplicate. Going to do that one more time and duplicate again. So now we have 3 toolpaths that all are associated with the same objects. I'm going to redefine what those are by right clicking and renaming for the shelf holes, coming back over and rename the layer. And the next one in the list is the hinge. They're still, even though the layer names are right, they're still associated with the same original layer. So we have to double click and open those layers up, come down to the selector, and make sure we change that. Now notice that it does say automatic here. That automatic means that we are associated with the toolpath. So if this was unchecked, that automatic is now going to say manual. Do the same thing for this hinge hole. Double click, use the selector. So all of the drilling toolpaths are complete. The next 2 are datas. That is going to be a inside profile. So rename, kind of pre-prepare. Do a profile to a depth of 375. Quarter-inch cutter, I would really be using a 3/8, but I'm not going to set up a new bit for that, so we'll just go with the quarter-inch cutter. I'm going to cut on the inside, come down to the selector. You can see as soon as I check that layer, those items became visible. For the next one, we'll take a look at what this setting here is for. So we'll say so we have now toolpath for that one. Same item, right click, duplicate. This is for the backside layer name, so rename that one. We'll close. This time, we're going to take a look at what this item right here is. So these are drawings that I've imported from another program, and they have depth associated with the imported file. So the line does have an elevation to it. And with that being set, we could say that we want to have that set by the offset. So we'll say close to that. Then we can see that we have a value that was brought in. Now, this value is not entirely correct. That is because of the material thickness and where kind of the elevation is. It's shifted by the material thickness. Our material thickness is 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to come back in here and tell it that I need to offset by 0.75, which is doing a minus 0.75. We'll close that. And now we can see the depth is 3/8 of an inch. Now you gotta be a little careful of just hard coding that 0.5 or 0.75 in there, because today we're running 3/4 inch material, but tomorrow I might be using this same toolpath template for cutting 5/8 material. So we wouldn't necessarily want to have that hard-coded 0.75. We could just do a minus Z. And just if you're curious on what that is, if you hit the equals key, that will give us the values. So there's a lot of internal variables that Vectric has. And if you remember from previous videos, we could do math within our text boxes here. So if I wanted to go, 0.75 minus 0.25 and then equals, that gives us the value. So I'm just going to leave it with a minus z and leave it just as it is. And it knows that z right now is 0.75 based on what we have set in the material thickness. So with that one done, we'll select calculate. Come back in there and change the layer name because I see it's still associated with the wrong layer. The final one we want to do is a cutout pass, which is profiling to the outside, and we'll cut to a minus or 0.76, a little bit deeper than the overall material. Or again, we could always go z plus 0.01. I'm not going to hit equals. I'm going to leave it there with that z there because tomorrow we might be 5/8 thick material, and we'd want to have this template automatically adjust based on the thickness of material. I'm going to choose to cut on the outside. Use the selector once again, have it associated. Cut. I'm going to uncheck the button there. Making sure our values are still on top. That is good. And just give that a name of cut. All right, so that is all of our toolpaths that we need for this item. So just to point out why we go through to make all of that association to a layer name. It didn't save a tremendous amount of time in creating these initially. Where it's going to save time is the next time we go to do some cabinet work. So what I'm going to quickly do now is put a checkbox to make all of these toolpaths visible. I'm going to click the button here that says Save Selected Toolpaths as a Template. So I'm going to give that a name, and let's just call that Cabinets and click Save. So let's say we have now a new cabinet job. Well, just to make sure, I am going to say Save, and then start off new, enter in our sizes. Just going to quickly get us some new cabinets. All right, so now we have a total of 5 sheets that have been nested here. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5 sheets. Clicking on each one of these sheets will bring that sheet to be the main sheet that is being worked on. So now going through what we just did, going through all of those sheets would be, that would be somewhat of a time-consuming process to do that for every one of these 5 sheets. But since we saved that as a template, we could come over here to the Toolpaths and click Load Toolpath Template, and just going to select that one that we had saved out, select Open. Now it's asking, do I want to apply this template across all of these sheets? Yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. So we'll say okay. So there we are. Now, there's one thing that I did, and I'll show you the mistake that I made. You see, it only did it for the cut layer, listed cut. It's the only thing that's there. So what happened? Well, this is a mistake that I make every time I set up a Toolpath template. And I wish I could say I made that mistake for the benefit of teaching and to show you what that is. But that's not the case, but it always works out to see mistakes. No, I do not want to save the draw or save that. And I'm going to open up. So some of you may realize what I did and what happened. So if you notice right now, the cut is our selected layer. All of the layers are visible, but only the cut one is the one that is selected. And I chose the option here to save selected toolpath as a template. The option that I should have selected is the one to the right of that says save all visible toolpaths as a template. So let's try that button. It's just going to overwrite our original one and say yes. So again, let's give that another shot. Get our nested sheets back. And now we have no toolpaths in the list, but we will open up the toolpath template. And again, it's asking, do I want to apply these toolpaths for every nested sheet? Well, again, yes, that's exactly what I want to do. And it warns you that you're cutting through. And you can see on the right side here, we're building up a toolpath list as it scrolls and goes through each sheet. So what it has done is organized our toolpathing on the right side in groups based on sheets. So if I want to see what is happening on sheet number 4, you can see that we have toolpathing here. That's dados, and checking that plus there shows us that only 2 of all of our toolpaths are on this layer. So we do not have any drilling or any of the other cutting that we set up on this layer. Going to sheet, let's take a look at sheet 1. Looks like we have the drilling. Everything is listed here. We could see that all of those templates are listed there. So that is one way to quickly organize and be able to duplicate repetitive tasks in trying to reduce the mistakes in toolpathing. There's really 2 types of folks that are going to make the most mistakes. They are the beginners and the experienced. The beginners are going to make mistakes because they're not quite sure. The experienced is going to make the mistakes because they become overconfident in what they think they know and are just going to click past and stop paying attention to things. So the more repetitive tasks there are, the better chances of a mistake happening. So by saving these out as toolpath templates and getting those locked in place, and they're always going to be right, it's going to help reduce any mistakes that you make in toolpathing. So that is how we create toolpaths based on layers and being able to save those out as a template for reuse. This one is have no layers in here. It's a project of mine. There's a lot going on. It's not that big of a job. It's only a 12 by 12 square material here. There's a lot of different depths and 3 different bits that are being used, and it's sometimes my brain doesn't quite work and focus to be able to do it all separate based on just clicking on the toolpaths. And as I make modifications and continue on with the design, I want to keep it linked, but I don't want to have to go through the toolpathing process just yet. So we're going to separate and break this drawing apart and put things on separate layers. And going to take a look at what we want to do. First is, I'll just give you an idea of what these components look like. Here is the one. We can see here we have 1, 2, 3 different depths that create that item. That smaller square, there's a lot of, it's 1, 2, again, 3 different depths there. And here is the other box here that, again, just several different things going on. So I'm going to start off by identifying the different objects and putting them on their own layers. And I'm going to name the layers in a way that I'm able to recognize the layer name. By looking at the layer name, I'm going to be able to determine what bit I should use and what operation and at what depth we want to use. So I'm going to start off by selecting the center one right here. And I know these objects are also all at that same depth. So selecting everything that I think I know I want to have at one depth. I'm going to right click and select to move to a new layer. That layer name, I'm going to call it Pocket. The depth is going to be 0.625, and leave that point out of it, 625. The bit I'm going to use is 1/4 inch. Say okay to that, and notice on the left side here now, we now have a layer name of what we just named it. So if we hit that little light bulb, that turns that layer off. There is this section right here also needs to be at that same depth. So I should have selected that layer as well. So I'm going to select it and do a move to. I'm not going to do a new layer, but I'll set it to the layer that has already been created, and that is turned off. Next thing that I'm going to do is some circles here that I want to cut all the way through. So it's going to be a profile. So selecting that, move to new layer. And I put IN, and that's for inside. I'm going to know that what that means when I go to Toolpath this at the depth of all the way through with a bit of 0.5. Again, we could shut that off. These objects here, I'm just going to use a drilling toolpath. So right click, move to a new layer. And turning the layers off as I'm working through this, and that way it is, you know, kind of showing what I have left to do and what I have not done yet. This set of objects here, I need to move to, again, new layer, and this is going to be a profile. Also an IN to a depth of 2.5 with a 1/8 inch bit. These two objects are going to be used with a cut on a profile. depth of 5.5, a half inch with a 625, a 16th inch bit. Say okay to that. And as you see, it's helping to keep those organized a little bit better. And go through. So give me a second to read just a question here. So yeah, colors are definitely one that could be used, and you can select vectors based on layer name, and we'll see how that happens in just a bit. So this layer is going to move to a new layer, going to do a, really could be a profile because the center section is going to get cut completely out, but I'm going to call it a pocket just to remove all of that material. And it is to a depth of 6, 8, 7, 5 with a 2.5 bit, 1/4 inch bit. We'll say okay. And getting closer. Actually, this one here, even though a 1/4 inch cutter could work, it's at the same depth as our other 1/8 inch cutter. So I'm just going to put that on the same layer as the 1/4 inch. Now notice as soon as I do this, since that layer is off, that automatically, like, it looks like it has been deleted, but it hasn't. It's still there, still exists. It's just turned off. Next thing that I want to create is the inside sections here. I want to pocket all of that out to a depth of 1/8 of an inch. This item here, we want to cut, I want to cut all the way through, and want to use a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 inch bit for that, just so we reduce the radius in the corners. Again, right clicking, do a these outside pieces here are really, it needed to be 1/8 of an inch thick. That is a you know, a back cover for the item that we just saw here. So that piece is designed to fit inside of this here. So I need it to be 1/8 of an inch thick. I don't have 1/8 inch material. That's okay. I have a machine that knows how to make thicker wood thinner. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to use the outside profiles here to set on a new layer. So it says it already exists. Wow, that's okay. That's why I keep naming consistent and helping. So this is a case where I could just right click and do a move to, not new layer, but move to the layer that I want it to be on. That is all good. The final layer that I want to do is one that is meant for cutting. And that is the only layer that I have on. So I have two options. I could select it all, right click and move to a layer. but seeing that that is the only one that is left, I'm just going to right click on the layer 1 name, rename that and call that cut, or you can call it profile. I just always know that cut is a profile outside full depth. So the same way that I created based on for the cabinets, I'm going to do the same thing here. I can turn all of that back on and organize these in a way that I would actually cut these out, do the cut first or last, I'm sorry. The 16th inch is right there. Now I have to do this in a weird type of order with tool changing. We've got 3 different bits. We have a 16th, an 1/8 inch, and a 1/4 inch bit. The 1/8 inch bit that I want to use in this area here does not have enough cutting length to be able to get down to that full depth until I have pocketed out some of that area with the 1/4 inch bit. So the way in the order I'm going to have to do this is I'm going to run the 16th inch bit first, which is cutting these 2 slots here. I will then go to a 1/4 inch bit, which will remove all of the interior parts, change to an 1/8 inch cutter, and then come back and do the final cutout. So hopefully that kind of made sense. So there is the 1/8 inch bit. Going to move it down in the list with the other 1/8 inch profile bit. So here we are. Got a 16th inch bit. That is not right. There's the 16th. All right. So we have our 16th inch bit, a 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. 2 Toolpaths that are using an 1/8 inch cutter, and one that is using a 1/4 inch for the final cutout. So now with the layer names done and complete and somewhat organized, and kind of helps my brain a little bit when you get a lot of tool paths, it becomes complicated and cumbersome. But if you have it separated on layers, you don't have to focus as much on did you select the right bit and double checking the tool paths. As long as you know the layer is the descriptive name and it is all the correct vectors are on that layer, the tool pathing, you don't have to focus a lot on that. It just happens. So to set the tool paths for this, again, I start at the top and work the way down. So selecting right here, doing a rename, only renaming that so I could do a Control C to copy. And I see that that is a profile to a depth of 1/2 inch. The cutter that we're going to use is the 16th inch. It's going to take a lot of passes, mainly because I don't want to break it. I could change that passes by clicking edit and modifying that pass depth, which I will do a little bit. 16th of an inch is good. Going to come down to the bottom, paste that layer name in, use our selector tools. Now they are selected. I know I'm going to have an issue here for this because that is exactly a 1/16 of an inch thick. Do that on the inside. And it's going to tell me that the tool cannot fit. So 2 options to correct that. One is resize that a little bit, or coming back into that tool path and using the offset allowance by entering in a very small offset. And we can see that as tool path. And basically, we're just going to go straight down this list and doing the exact same thing for everything that is in that list. Um, And if your tooling is set up correctly in your tool database, which hopefully it is, and if you notice I clicked change my material, we'll see that on the next one here. So we're going to do a profile to a depth of 1/4 inch, and notice I did change my material up here to give me bits that are only for that material, which all of my parameters are set up for. So I could continue on with that, but hopefully that's given you the idea of what's happening here, and the reason, hopefully you understand why it's very time saver by creating layers. So I said it was going to be a little shorter than normal. I think that is going to be it for my talking today. Thank you for visiting, and we'll see you in a couple days.